you.
Yeah. So that'll be taken care of.
I did reach out to Mr. Brooks because of course we're still waiting on his Stuckey maps. And I guess the lawyers have sent out the maps for signature to Stuckey, and he was going to check on that to see where anything was with regard to those maps. So we're waiting on those for signature, to get in there for signature.
Okay. Sounds good. So with that, do we want to jump into Sailor Mill and CT Mail?
Yeah, I think so, Steve. I just want to put a comment out there just to be fully transparent to everyone. So both Mr. Seifer and Mr. Dunn gave me a call, I think last weekend, and just had some questions around next steps, timing, etc. And I essentially told them that, now with the expertise of our guests online, CT Mail, and being able to leverage their expertise across the myriad of different things, I think Seeker being the most prominent, probably followed by the public hearing, they will help us efficiently move through those processes, and then ultimately get us, to a point where, we can take next steps. So I positioned that with them. They were asking questions around February, March. Ideally that'd be great, but can't commit to any timeline. So with that, I just wanted to put that out there, I guess, Janelle, for the record, that I did receive those calls and have those discussions. And it's all in good faith. Please don't let me misinterpret this with my mannerisms. Very cordial conversations, very amicable, and collaborative.
Okay. I know Catherine is on. I guess I'd like to invite you to say a few words if you feel appropriate in terms of where CT Mail stands and kind of just a 100,000 foot view of where we're at.
Great, thank you, Steve. Hi, I'll introduce myself. My name is Catherine Sarah. I'm an engineer and project manager at CT Mail. And I believe some of the planning board members have spoken to me or met me in another meeting. You also met my colleague, our planner, Chris Koenig, who could not be with us tonight. He actually had to go to an in-person meeting in northern Washington County. So one of the few towns that still is holding in-person meetings. But he and I are kind of the two lead folks currently helping the town of Olive with reviewing this project. So what we've reviewed to date has been the information provided by the applicant's engineer, which does include the subdivision plan, environmental assessment form, some other correspondence regarding threatened and endangered species, and the other applicable paperwork that the board has already seen. So I did provide kind of a working document to Steve this afternoon. I see he did forward it to the board members. And again, this is not a comment letter. These are just really our working notes intended to discuss tonight, just to make that clear again for the record. So I do want to say that the project is, moving, along in the sense that information provided to date has been applicable. There's maybe a few minor items that we would need to see before we could make any recommendations for the planning board to actually start the process of determination. So just quickly, the project does meet zoning. My understanding is the planning board has declared itself lead agent. Is that correct, Steve or Janelle?
Yes, they did that last meeting.
Yep.
Great. So I believe then the 30-day coordinated review period would have expired by this date. Have you received any response to that?
Well, I was going to report that we actually I've only received one response back. It is not negative. It was from, let's see, I believe it was from the Catskill, the chair for the Catskill, our Catskill, Mr. White, actually, Caleb Carr. So they were just saying, yes, it's fine. Go ahead and do that. So
great. All right. Yep. So then essentially it means that the Town of Olive Planning Board is your seeker lead agent, which is appropriate for a project of this size. meaning that you have control over the local review and the seeker process. So again, if whoever has control of that just wants to kind of scroll up to the top, there's just a few things maybe for Barry to note that we are dismissing the plat plan, and I think that must have just been in the, getting us all the information. That one sheet's missing. Again, not a big deal. That plat map just.
So you're missing what, sheet 2?
Yep, it just misses some of the setback lines, the boundary of the 100-year floodplain, and those other items that would be on the plat plan. Just nothing that prevents
Right.
review.
Well, there's another professional, just so you know, I don't know if you received the surveyor's map. Don
Yes.
Brewer.
That's my fault, Barry. I forgot to look for Brewer's map.
No, but I'm asking Catherine, did you receive a copy of that?
No, we did not.
No, okay. So
Yeah.
just so you know too, we're working on the plan. We're detailing the stormwater, providing all the calculations and preparing the SWIP, which is pretty much done at this point. And in that process and meeting with the developers, we decided to eliminate a lot. So we're taking out lot, I think it's shown as number 5 right now. It's kind of like behind the existing lot that's on the road there. And so that allow us to just have a little more room up there on the ridge. We were trying to keep all our drainage from flowing down into the state wetlands because some of the houses are either on the ridge or near the ridge. And instead of having some of the runoff from those houses flow south into that wetland, we're going to keep them all so it flows northernly into the watershed for what would ultimately be the Rochester Creek.
Thank you. And then just again, we reviewed, the initial application review was really for zoning compliance. Obviously, it does meet the zoning. In fact, there could be many more single family lots per the zoning. So the applicant is choosing to move forward with an application that is less than the underlying zoning maximum.
Say that again. What was that comment?
The applicant is proposing an application that has less lots than you could allow under the zoning, meaning you're
Okay, right.
providing a less dense
Yes.
application to the town. I make it clear.
Thank you. Thank you.
The setbacks are all met. Again, your side yard, rear yard, building height, building coverage, they're all met. There's no issues when it comes to the straight up zoning for the exurban residential zone.
Sorry to interrupt, but if I could ask, if you're not speaking, if you could please mute your mics because there's a bunch of echo going on.
Thank you, Steve.
So just a few notes that we came up with. If we could just make sure that the plat plan, which was the plan we're missing, has the boundary of the 100-year floodplain. That would just be helpful for the record because there are some rules in the zoning that discuss the lot size when there are floodplain on the property. And we do want to note that there are driveways shown within the 25-foot side yard setback. Setbacks do not preclude driveways from being located in that area. We just want to make it clear that that is permitted to have driveways in the side yard setback.
Is that specifically in the town code?
No, there's nothing in the town code that addresses that, and we have allowed it, so.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
it's not, I mean, given current zoning and previous history, it's not an issue.
It just, some of the comments received have alluded to that being an issue, and we determined that it was not an issue to locate a driveway within a side yard setback.
Yeah, because I've had people say you couldn't have driveways in the setbacks before. And I said, well, how do you get onto the lot?
True. Yeah, really that statement was there just to remind the board that it's permissible to have the driveway in a setback.
Okay, thank you.
It is a building setback, not a driveway setback.
Thank you.
Great. So again, from a zoning perspective, we don't feel that there's any issues with regards to the application at this point. I know the board is really kind of interested in looking at the next steps. So I'll just kind of maybe scroll down to that. So it's going to be the top of the page.
You did make some points regarding the septic systems, and distances between the septic and the well, as well as the grade for some of the septic systems, right?
Yes, and that's something we can share separately with the engineers. Again, a lot of it was just, you're kind of at a very preliminary engineering level, and I know you're working towards that. So it was just items that we would say is just to focus on as you proceed with the more in-depth design.
Right, we definitely do not want to get into a point by point going
No,
through.
and
Okay.
they're not items that would preclude the project from moving forward.
Yeah.
When I'm designing something, I like to get just, if, someone notices something, I like to know up front versus proceeding with design and them mentioning, oh yeah, I had a problem with it.
Yeah, so did we get a copy of this letter yet?
No, this is honestly just a talking point for tonight. This is not a formal letter whatsoever.
No, but can we get a copy just so we can, refer to it? Yeah, if, just so we understand where you're thinking, like particularly on, you're talking about some of the setback issues, because we're working on the SWIP right now. So if there's some things that, that you had want us to bring to our attention, now would be the time to do it before we resubmit all the detailed engineering. So
Absolutely.
if we can just get a copy of that and just acknowledge it's unofficial.
Yep.
Janelle, can you forward that to Barry? And she might be muted.
I am muted. Yes, I'll send that to him.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great. So I know kind of the point of this workshop was to really to go over the next steps. So again, in terms of seeker, and if you don't mind, I'm actually going to mute for a second and remind
No worries.
the occupants of my house they need to be a little quiet. So
Hey, so Catherine, you do that. So Steve and board, I wanted to, since Catherine's got to attend to something,
oh, I'm fine. I just had to, sternly remind the others that mom's on a
no
meeting.
worries. I was just going to say if it made sense at this point, Catherine, as well. If I can't see who's on, I guess Frank or George, did you want to speak to the conservation easement? Is this an appropriate time?
Yeah, I think it would be a good suggestion, Dave, to have them speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, you're the boss, so if you want us to, or one of the bosses.
Well, and again, I didn't mention
Yeah.
this. I didn't mention this for the record, but they also, when Frank and George called me, they alluded to, really I would say you guys were excited about it. And I think, it's evidence that you're listening and hearing everybody involved, kind of a 360-degree perspective. So yeah, I know Helene doesn't have a copy of it. I don't know if David E., if Frank or George, are you prepared to share a map? Do you have something you could share that would show that easement?
Well, Barry's working on it, Dave, but I emailed you guys a sketch of the overall with the green areas. I think I saw it up in when Helene was passing through.
Yeah, if I could speak up, we do have a copy that I either share on my screen or maybe, I don't know if Heather's on from my office is on. Heather, do you have that current map, or I could open it on my screen if you could share it? And it does show where the conservation area is. At least I believe it does.
And
Helene
Dave,
might have it because I did send it to the board.
I saw it.
Well, the
when
green
Helene was
area, but we
flipping through.
that was their preliminary, and then we sat down and we went over some of the other features and we
Okay.
modified it. We added quite some substantially more.
Okay. So so Barry, I think you alluded to, is it Heather Gabriel?
Yes.
All right, so I think we can enable her to share her screen.
Yeah, let me, I might have it open on mine too right now. If I can,
Hey, Dave, and not to correct you, but just because it's factual, I didn't actually talk to you this week. George talked to you. We've talked in the past, but we didn't speak this week.
No, okay, within the
that's
last.
the green one.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, just to be factual, yeah. There's the sketch that we sent you. So, the lower half is on the Pacama Bly area, and the north side is, going towards the Rochester Creek. So, these are the areas that we think should be put in the conservation area to protect those natural resources. Again, they are roughly following the stone walls on the property because they're easy monuments for people to understand. But the one on the lower part includes all of the 100-foot setback of the state wetlands. But it basically runs along the line of the stone wall. It's a little bit forward of the stone wall, but the stone wall demarks that area. And, Mike is working on the actual legalese on it, but it's basically, obviously no building, no clear cutting, those woods and those, trees would be protected with the exception of some diseased trees. Fortunately, that side doesn't seem to have too many of the ash. It's mostly the other side of the road. But the same thing on the north side of the road. You see that diagonal line is one of the stone walls from the old farm fields that runs along there. So that's how we decided that. And Barry's going to do a calculation, but I mean, it seems to me like a third, even maybe more of the 65 acres that will be in a conservation area.
Yeah, we'll work with the surveyor, break down all the acreage for each lot and the totals. I just want to point out too that in that northern conservation area, we're also going to have water quality basins, 2 of them in that area. So we're going to structure that easement so that we can maintain, the stormwater facilities there. There'd be ponds, stormwater ponds, that water quality treatment to meet the overall requirement for the stormwater.
Can I just ask a quick technical question? And maybe this is for Mike. I know Frank is calling it a conservation area. Barry just said easement. I believe you're doing an area. What is the difference and what might be the parameter set? And what is this designation actually doing?
Can you hear me, Heidi?
Yes.
That's a good question. I was just gonna say that my preference from a legal standpoint is to do, you can call it a conservation area or a restricted area, but my preference is to do it as a deed restriction. A deed restriction and permanent no build restriction area. And there's several reasons for that. Number one, I think it's more protective of the environment than a conservation easement, which can go away because of any number of changes that could happen in the future. Also, the practical reality to conservation easements is that you need a third party to hold them. They're not so easy to find, and they're not so easy to find a qualified third party to hold them. And most towns don't want to be the grantee. Also, that area will be totally restricted. So if the town were to be the grantee, we would have to make a prohibition that the public couldn't enter any of these lots, because the intention is for those lot owners to still wholly control those areas, but not be able to clear cut trees and not be able to put appurtenant structures in those areas, in those conservation areas, like swimming pools and things of that nature. So I think that which I've used for many, many years, I think the no build restrictions work better. And most importantly, I think they're understood by the property owner better than conservation easements, which tend to be very lengthy, have a lot of superfluous language in them, and are difficult in some manner to enforce, because you just have several other layers of people involved. Here, the covenants and restrictions would be enforceable by anybody in the subdivision against any of the other subdivided lots, and all of the lot owners collectively, as well as the town. I always make sure that the no build and restrictive covenants are enforceable by the town. The town generally would not get involved unless there's a threatened violation or a violation that gets reported to them, and then they have the right to go in and enforce them. But I will provide a draft and give you either a redacted version of one that I've done for another development, or one that's more tailored to this development, so the board can see what I'm talking about. But generally speaking, and I would also defer to CT Mail and also to Jim Bacon for their input on it. But generally speaking, I think that the no build restriction and restrictive covenants are an easier and a more protective mechanism to work with.
And
I-
Mike, those notes will be on the filed map when it gets filed?
Yes, they would be filed on the file map, and
I
the
think that's a good
and the
way to go.
restriction would be added as a recorded document.
Oh, good.
In the, so that means that those restrictions would follow the title to each deed, individual deed, and they would be in perpetuity. They would not be able to be changed or altered to change them in the future.
Yeah, in my opinion, that's the best way to go too.
Are you going to be restricting tree cutting in these areas?
My understanding, and I'll again let Frank and Barry take it on. I do not believe that there will be accessory structures in these areas. I do not believe that there will be any clear cutting. There may be dead and diseased tree cutting of some nature. We could, generally there's a provision allowed for that, but it is the intention to restrict these areas very severely.
If the trees grow up and obstruct the view, can they cut them?
Not in those areas. Nope.
Yeah, I don't know about a view here. I would have to defer to Frank and Barry. I have not been to the site yet.
No, absolutely not. In those areas, no. Just, the ability to cut a dead or diseased tree, I guess, if it looked really unsightly, but no. When George and I did our Boyce Mill subdivision, which we've mentioned before, we had a no build restrictive zone. It had to do more with the beautiful open fields that my dad had created out there. But, and like Mike said, it's best through the covenants, because you have the other homeowners out there supporting that and seeing what's going on. But I've mitigated things still on Boyce Mill Road 18 years later. Somebody wanted to put a horse pasture field in their no build field zone, and it wasn't allowed. I didn't give them permission to do it, nor did the rest of the neighbors. So it's something that works out. I still, oversee things out there when people have questions about covenants.
It's also good that the town is can be the enforcement party, so the neighbors don't have to be the bad guys against each other and have a civil war.
Right.
I don't think the town would ever want to take on that responsibility. So I think it's whatever you put into the deed that the people in the subdivision, if they want to enforce it, I don't think the town's going to come in and lock you up if you cut a tree in one of those shaded areas. It's just, we just don't, we're not equipped to do that type of thing.
And I think it's a good point. The way that I word that is that customarily, the way that I word that provision is that the homeowners can enforce it against each other. If for some reason homeowners are not enforcing it, then the town can come in, can step in. But it's the town's discretion as to whether or not they want to step in. And this becomes a common problem with conservation easements. Conservation easements will have like a baseline study usually. They'll say, okay, here's when it existed on March 30th, 2021. So then you'll get to a year later and they'll be doing their visit, the third party visit, if you will, which is customarily not even the grantee. It's someone else that's hired that comes out, an independent party, to say what has changed. Then you discover things may have changed and you're dealing with 4 different entities instead of 2 entities to try and remedy it. And I think it's a much easier way to do it this way, where the homeowners who are going to invest a significant amount of money in having very nice lots in these areas have the ability to force it against each other. And if for some reason they don't, the town steps in and says, look, here's the covenants. We have the right to enforce them, and we're going to charge you for our time to do it. We're not, we're not doing it out of the goodness of our heart. So.
And, I also plan to be around, and I already have friends that are moving into that area. And if somebody starts something that's not allowed, we're all going to know about it. So.
Thank you guys for that really thorough explanation. That really cleared up a lot. Thank you.
No, and Heidi, this was something that you initially asked us for, and then Dave interpreted it also. So we just wanted to let you know it's absolutely something that we wanted to do and we were planning to do, and Barry's working on real drawings, but I wanted to get the sketch to you. Because I
No,
think
we-
it's kind of very graphic and you can see pretty easily.
So given that we've kind of gotten down into a level of detail, I would just like a little clarification on lot 5. What are you going to do with lot
Yeah,
5?
so if, Janelle, if you bring it down just a little bit more, that lot line right there. Whoops, no, I'm sorry, honey. Just the lot line. That line, we're eliminating that line. If you go back up to the road, nope.
Okay,
The one between 5 and 6. Yeah, 5 and 6
Yep.
goes away. And then you see my little diagonal line there. That's an adjustment we made. The mobile home lot has a stone wall, but the property line doesn't follow the stone wall. So I wanted to pick that up and bring that back so that again, we're following the stone walls. You can see a little bit of, in that drawing, the stone wall on the mobile home lot, which isn't its property line. So when it comes to lot 4, I wanted to adjust that over to the stone wall.
so lot 5 no longer exists and lot 4 and 6 are basically absorbing.
5 and 6, basically the line between 5 and 6 goes away and it becomes one bigger lot.
Yep. Got it.
So we're
Thank you.
gonna have 13 lots, is what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay.
So Barry said we need to renumber, so we can't just miss a 5, so we'll renumber them, which I think Barry's working on in his office currently.
Okay. I guess my view back to Catherine, given what you've seen so far, while Catherine and Frank and George and everybody involved in the process, where do you think we stand in terms of having the secret public hearing? And
Sure.
being prepared for it.
Steve, I think we had kind of briefly discussed this over the phone, and really the regulations on seeker, and I'm saying this in a non-legal fashion, are not specific about when you should hold the hearing. In fact, the regulations don't even state one's required, although the majority of municipalities hold public hearings. And, we'd obviously felt that it was appropriate for this project. So I do think what's been submitted is appropriate for a public hearing. And I say that because holding a public hearing at a very sketch plan or conceptual level sometimes is difficult on the public because what's being presented is missing a lot of information. You definitely need to make sure that the map's adjusted to remove one lot, that the stormwater management areas are better defined. But right now, there's nothing that would preclude you from scheduling that public hearing. Again, I know I've seen initially some of the comments. There are a lot of comments pertaining to traffic. We suggest that the applicant at least provide some basic level of information on how many additional trips the now 13 homes will add to the roadway, with the understanding that this is not a large subdivision, but it appears that some of the neighbors feel it's large for that stretch of road. One item that the town would need to determine, and this might be more of a highway question, is actually if you scroll down to the bottom, right there, up again. Just want to focus that. Sorry, it's at the end of the letter, all the way down. Great. So where it says comment or note 14, the town code is not clear, and this is extremely common with any municipality, rural, urban, suburban. The town code does not appear to require that the existing town road must be improved to current town road highway standards if a new project is being built on the road. In our experience, we feel that the local officials, in this case, it would likely, be the highway superintendent, to determine that whether or not the applicant would need to look at any improvements to the existing roadway. In some cases where improvements are warranted would be if there's limited sight distance. Again, the applicant has not provided that information, although just looking at the roadway, there does not appear to be any significant vertical or horizontal curves that would create sight distance issues. That is the requirement of the applicant to look at that issue. Also looking at road width, the road is generally narrow. However, it does not appear to be so narrow that it does not meet applicable rural road standards. We would ask the applicant to look at the town code for the road section and or AASHTO standards for a rural road. Again, traffic did come up a lot in some of the comments we saw. And we do want to just state that there is some additional information the applicant could provide to further provide justification to the planning board that this would not have an impact on the local road network. So
And you,
That
can you,
open to some
can you
comments from the
elaborate?
board or from the applicant at this point, because I do think that this is something that will come up.
Catherine, this is Michael. Barry is gonna look at the ITE tables, and also he can look at the AASHTO regulations too, in terms of sight distance for the speed limit, things of that nature. So he was already gonna look at that because we know that that came up in some of the initial comments. Although this is I think clearly this subdivision is relatively modest for the roadway network that's there. But I think it would be good if Barry did demonstrate that. I'll let Barry take over as to what he was planning on doing. And I do think the sight distance in light of the speed limit, things of that nature are probably a good idea to look at.
Can I interject for a second?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Frank, because you met with the highway superintendent. Could you explain?
Yeah, yes, I will. So Catherine, yeah, very early on, I met with Brian, the highway superintendent. We walked every lot. I had put stakes in the ground for every driveway. We looked at sight lines. I adjusted any that he might want. They represent on the drawings. So he is improving the road. It's a beautifully capped road, but because it was farm fields earlier, he is going to want to put in a ditch along the kind of south side of the road where the water comes down the hill. And he's asked for culverts under the road, and he's marked those out. They show in Barry's drawing. So the improvements are basically creating a ditch along the southern side of the road, and then having 3 culverts that take the water onto our property on the other side. And those will lead into those water quality basins. So Brian has been out there and is very familiar with the property from that meeting. He seemed to get a good grasp of what he wanted. And creating on, I think it's lot 4, where it's kind of steep. He's asked us to regrade that so the water will go into the ditch that he's going to create better. So we have had those conversations.
Great, thank you.
And the sight lines out there are great. It's mostly straight. There was a couple little scrub pines that he might want us to cut down when we put in some of those driveways, but the sight lines are really good.
So I think the discussion in our last call was that we'd look at the mid-February meeting as a potential for the public hearing for SECRA. That's still what everybody's thinking? A month from now?
That's certainly good with us. In fact, we're almost ready to resubmit the revised plans with the SWIP. And that was my question is, do we have time to submit that before the public hearing? Which, I could get them out by the end of the week, certainly. And
Right.
and I think that would give plenty of time so that they are, available for public review. I guess you need 2 weeks notice before the public hearing.
Yeah.
File the documents.
So, right, so it would be February 16th, as I guess Helene is pointing out on the calendar.
You can't do it by the 2nd, I guess, right?
No.
Not with the lead requirements for the public notices and all that. So,
Yeah, we did, just so the board knows, I talked briefly to Jim Bacon early on for the SECRA public hearing, although it's not required for a public hearing, which is in advance of a determination of significance. The SECRA regulations do speak to a 14-day public hearing requirement in terms of findings statements. So I generally, just to be on the safe side, like to provide for 14 days minimum public hearing notice, and that way you're covered.
Yep, okay. So anybody disagree with moving forward with the 16th?
No?
Janelle, is that something you're prepared? You have the information you need to get the notices out?
I'm not exactly sure about the proper wording for a legal notice, and I was also, the applicant was going to get me the additional envelopes and everything for that mailing,
We could do that, but my office will do that.
because we were going to include, I guess, the mailing was going to include like all of the, all of the agencies that had gotten the original lead agency letter.
Yep, I believe that was the discussion.
Yeah, we can get you all that.
Yeah, so if you can get that to the town offices as soon as possible.
Yep.
And then I don't know if somebody wants to just, because I want to make sure that I'm putting the proper wording in the legal notice.
I think the town attorney should do that.
Okay,
And Janelle, you still have the second set of envelopes for the neighbors, correct? That we
correct. I do have
supplied
those
you?
for like the normal public hearing that will be held on the application, yes.
Just to clarify, Ed, by town attorney, you mean Jim?
Yeah, Jim Bacon, yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay,
Bacon, you don't mind, do you? We just put a tail on you there.
that's fine. I don't
We
know.
also checked into the ag data statement. It does not appear that we have any agricultural operations within 500 feet. We have prepared an ag data statement in case we need it. Right now, it does not look like it's going to be necessary.
Okay.
And I think the one other item that the board should discuss tonight. So right above seeker in our letter, we indicate that GML 239M, which is the county referral, is not required due to the size of the project and its location. And that whether or not the planning board still would like to go through that referral. So I think at this point, it's not required.
Yeah.
Municipalities would do it almost regardless.
If my memory serves, we have actually discussed this, and I think due to the proximity to the two other towns and concerns from the neighbors in the other towns within the county, that I believe that we had planned, and if anybody disagrees, let me know, but we had planned to go ahead and refer this to the county for review.
Yeah,
I recall that as well, Steve.
yeah, we talked about it.
This is Mike again. We don't have any objection to a referral to the Ulster County Planning Board. My only caveat to that would be that 239M requires, quote, a full statement of the proposed action, end quote, sent to the County Planning Board. As you can imagine, over 30 years of practice, I've had a lot of referrals to the County Planning Board. What that means is everything that you need to make your determination of significance or your determination of significance, meaning if you render a neg deck, you can refer it after the neg deck is granted. If you render a pos deck on a project, you can send it then. What you can't do is send it too early. So you have to have, you'd have to have your, if you were gonna, for instance, I've done it another way too with neg decks, is that you can have everything submitted and then a draft neg deck before the board. So you could say to, if you were in court, you could say to the judge, we had everything that they needed for a full statement of the proposed action. But there's been a lot of litigation over the years about the referral. My only two caveats would be that when we refer it, we make sure that it's a full statement of the proposed action in that manner, and that we know that it is not required to send it. The board wants us to send it, but it's not required to send it because just in order to protect the record. But that would be the only two caveats, and I'd let Jim's familiar, I think, with the same case law I'm talking about, so I'll let Jim take over.
You know, that's my understanding as well, and I think it makes sense to, you know, it may be something that the board wants to do after they do their secret determination and are working on the site plan. The site plan is going to have a public hearing as well, so you know, maybe the comments would come back before that second site plan or that second public hearing was held. I don't know how, traditionally, I don't know how the board has dealt with this issue, but you know, as Mike said, you want to make sure that the planning board knows that this is discretionary, but out of your own abundance of caution, you're doing that.
Yep. I think, again, my thinking sounds like similar to yours, which is that we would submit it after the neg deck or positive, whatever, the declaration determination, and then look for feedback from the county, hopefully, as the other public hearings take place. Okay. Any comments, anybody, other thoughts? It's quiet.
Yeah, I have a question, or I have a statement. I contacted Dennis Doyle and sent them a copy of the map, and I wanted to get his feedback on it. And his comment was that he would like to see it more dense, more lots. So.
Yep. There's
he's a fan of cluster housing.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. That's
I know.
They're a fan of clustering and more lots in a smaller area and then more green space, right? So
yes.
So that's
I guess I have a question. I guess it's a point of exactness. So Mr. Bacon, based upon what Mr. Moriello shared, would we actually go through the seeker and finalize the determination, whatever it is, pos or neg? Or I think I heard the word a draft determination and then send it.
Yeah, I think a draft makes sense. Then if there's something that comes back that the planning board, that the Ulster County Planning Board thinks is significant, it can be addressed. But this is a pretty straightforward project. I don't really see that happening. But in the past, how has the board?
Yeah, you know, I'll speak to that. I mean, my history on this board, traditionally, you know, there is it's more of a guiding type relationship where, you know, when we're uncertain about a certain project and it falls within the proximities of, you know, when we should, you know, defer something to the county, you know, we do so. Now we have some discretion there, as was mentioned, but in this case, you know, the board has previously discussed it, but normally we go to Dennis and his staff for guidance, right? Hey, based on all the knowledge of this volunteer board, we're thinking this, but could you just give us you know, since you're the professionals, could you validate what we're thinking? That's literally been, you know, and when we've got other engagements in front of us where that's the live TV that's going on, but it sounds here it's a little different because I don't recall that normally we go through the seeker in full before we refer it, but I could be wrong there.
Well, maybe the thing to do then, I mean, it sounds like the applicant is ready to submit some fairly detailed documents that include the septic plans and that sort of thing before the public hearing. So see how things go at the public hearing. And if the board feels as though they have enough there to refer it, you know, and there's an idea that the project doesn't propose, you know, the potential for really significant impacts, then maybe that's the time to refer it if the board feels more comfortable getting there a little bit earlier.
Okay. I guess Catherine, any comments?
No, it's more just understanding how the board would like to proceed. So essentially, you know, we just need a little bit more information from the applicant. I would say at this point, really just providing that information regarding traffic. I believe the floodplain mapping is going to show up on the surveyor's plat plan. But other than that, if you start to go through the part 2 of the EAF, Some boards like to do that, pretty soon, actually go through the EAF checklist, determine their thoughts on whether or not any of the impacts would be moderate to large. Again, I can tell you that there's 13 different, we'll say, types of impacts, and really the ones that we're going to be looking more are going to be traffic, impact to wetlands, threatened endangered species, and those. So I guess, does the board want to start looking at the part 2 soon? Do you want to wait till after the public hearing? It's really up to you.
Soon.
Yeah.
I'm just board speak up, but I think at this point, we've got an
Yeah,
applicant they're continuing to evolve their map. It sounds like, they're making good progress on that. I think part 2 of the seeker is going to speak to a lot of the information we'll be getting from the neighbors, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm wondering if kind of going through the form at the next meeting might be appropriate, just as a level set.
So after the public hearing, Steve, the next meeting then?
I was actually thinking the next, as in 2 weeks from now,
Yeah, February 2nd.
before the public hearing even.
Yeah, that would be good timing, just because, again, if there's anything that the board feels is missing, it would allow the applicant to address that. But again, if there's certain items that the board kind of wants CT Mail's input on, I can share redacted sample neg decks from, we'll say, major subdivisions and other communities that have similar, we'll say, concerns from neighbors, such as traffic, community character, whatnot. Because again, some of the items on the EAF are very, we'll say, as an engineer, I like numbers and, there's an answer for everything. But other items on seeker that you review might not be so scientific, such as community character and those things, where it is honestly someone's opinion. We can kind of discuss how we've massaged that in the past. But I think the board kind of knows what is going to be a concern from the public at this point, correct?
We certainly know the feedback we've gotten so far.
Yeah,
So,
we can't predict the unspoken neighbor, but we've certainly
Right.
heard those.
Would the board have Catherine fill out the draft of the part 2? Is that your preference, and then have that go to the board in advance of the meeting?
I can do that. I can say that it's generally going to be me physically filling out the form, and then almost overwriting on the form and highlight certain questions that you might want to discuss.
I was just going to say that.
And they kind of appreciate that. I say candor or assistance.
So I would subscribe, so Catherine, I would subscribe to that approach. I was actually going to say something similar, right? So that if the next agenda, we could lead off with going through your guidance, if you will, and then having some board discussion around various points. I think that would be very productive. And then potentially, I guess I'll ask this as a question to Mr. Bacon and Catherine. Do you think going through that could lead us to a draft that then we could then defer to the county along with the entire application?
Yeah, I think that's
Yes.
a great idea. Then you have some time to look it over before the public hearing as well. And, I think that's a very good idea.
Right, because I'm thinking part of referring it to the county, and I don't know what I don't know, but then they would socialize it with, I would think, key stakeholders from the 2 adjacent towns, right? At least create that visibility. Okay.
This is Mike again. The only thing about the board I would just caution the board on is that the case law about referral too early is you don't want to refer too early. So at some point, if you're going to refer to the Ulster County Planning Board and you want to get their input before you make a determination of significance, I would say whatever you think your determination of significance is going to be in writing, the part 3, be sent to them in a draft form so they can see it. And then like Jim says, if they come back and they say, well, we think this project should be, this project should be far more dense and with, with lots that are clustered. I am going to presume that by the time that gets to them, whatever written form this is, whether POSDEC, NEGDEC, whatever it is, there's going to be a determination as to why the board feels the way it does about a conventional subdivision versus a cluster subdivision. So I think we got to be careful to make sure that we actually send them a full statement of the proposed action, so their comments are meaningful. Like I said, the other thing you can do is you can make your determination of significance and then send that to them. That serves as the full statement of the proposed action. But if you wanted to hear from them before you made a final determination, we would have to, wait until probably you have something written to send them with respect to seeker.
I believe in the past, the county has, I'll say, offered to kind of do a preliminary review and just provide some feedback versus the formal yay or nay. Is that something that perhaps we should look at? Or, I mean, given the concern about going in too early for the formal?
Well, the referral is not required in any event, but it's the board's preference.
Yep. Okay.
I think you are going to hear, I think what Frank said is true, or what George said is true, rather. You're going to hear from Dennis, oh yeah, do, a cluster subdivision with, with 25 lots, but, then you have roads and you have tree clearing, and I don't see how a cluster subdivision is going to solve much here at all, but in terms of being a better project.
Okay.
The next meeting is on the 3rd, February 3rd.
The 3rd or the 2nd?
The 3rd.
3rd, they're the day after us.
Yep, they meet on February 3rd, March 3rd, and April 7th.
Right.
All right, so just to kind of give CT Miller marching orders, so Janelle's going to forward our initial notes to Barry. Again, Barry, they're really just high level notes, nothing that would, change your design. And then we will work next week to get you kind of our opinions on the part 2 of the EAF and indicate if there's any additional information that the applicants need to provide.
Thank you. And then we'll make a determination as a board based upon the dialogue we just heard around the referral to the county or not, if it's too early or whatever the case may be. But, Stephen, I liked your words, and the question was asked, how do we normally work with the county? It really is around preliminary review, right? They coach and counsel. But I certainly don't want to put us in a legal situation. So that's the last thing we want to do.
Yep. This is quite of a large project, and I think it would be we have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we don't send to the county are things that are, I don't want to say benign, but they certainly are way less complicated than this one.
They're benign from a county
they don't
standpoint.
appreciate us sending things like that to them, but something like this, we need to.
Right.
I think there's a difference between feedback in terms of the design as presented and staying within the parameters of the law and zoning versus maybe a preference in, well, I would have done more lots versus, okay, that's great, but right. And I think Dennis can thread the needle on that. I'm confident he can. Okay, so Janelle, can I just summon your attention, please?
Sure.
So I'm thinking for the next meeting, we'd like to lead off with Sailor Mill. They've been very patient and certainly put forth tremendous resources. So in terms of just building the next agenda, let's kick off with, Catherine, we'll put you right on the spot, after some administrative things. If you can speak to the part 2 seeker as you spoke about, then we'll have some discussions. I think we should try to limit it to maybe the first, what do we think, 45 minutes, an hour?
Yeah, let's keep it to 45.
All right, let's do it to 45 because we also want to be fair to the rest of the public. So I know, Janelle, you have the Miss Rice coming back for the business in Boyceville, and then we have Mr. Flesh coming back to us with the glamping enterprise. And let's just, and unless there's something urgent, like the lanes, you know, because I know they're under the,
Well, bread alone.
or bread alone, right? Thanks, Steve, right? Let's try to cap it at those. Let's cap it at 3, so the 2 I mentioned, and then either bread alone or lane or something like that.
Oh, the lanes aren't even close to,
All right, so then just bread alone, thank you.
We just got a note for Brett alone, right, Janelle? We just got
yeah,
that.
we just got this afternoon the recommendation from the county planning board on bread alone.
Right. They like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, they pretty much just reinforced, and I guess this is an example for everyone listening. They basically reinforced, right? So we haven't done a seeker there yet. We sent them essentially all the components of a complete application, and they just gave us some, again, coaching and guidance, right? So.
So with regard to the agenda, so originally we had given Ms. Rice a public hearing time for the
Yeah.
next meeting.
Oh, did we?
Yeah,
But we can, you know, it's,
What was that time? I apologize. Was it 7?
well, it was 7:10, but
why don't we stick with that and we'll do
Yeah.
Taylor Mill right after it.
is that all right, or?
Pretty quick.
Yes. So then Sailor Mill party, I mean, then we would defer you to probably 7:30. So then
Yeah,
you could- you could plan your
I
schedule.
don't think her public hearing is going to take very long.
No, but we've got to finish the other documents, right? We've got to do the, you know, the whole, the checklist, the, you know, everything.
Yeah, but it's a site plan, so it's not as much, you know.
Yep,
but,
yep.
And then, so we'll do her planning, we'll do her public hearing, and then we'll move to Sailor Mill. And then we'll just put Mr. LaFleche. Did you want Brett alone just to give them the nod? They're biting at the bit to move
Yeah,
forward.
I think we should invite them back in, given that we've gotten the feedback from the county.
Yeah. You just may want to let them know, though, it'll, you know, probably be pretty deep into the 8 o'clock hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. LaFleche, we probably can't put him off if we're going to be doing a public hearing on Sailor Mill mid-February.
Well, I mean, I would, could you have a conversation with Mr. LaFleche that, I mean, since he's not going to be opening to the warmer months, it would probably be in his best interest, unless he wants to wait on a Zoom for a few hours. You know, if he could push him off to maybe the first meeting in March. I mean, if he's going to dot the i's and cross the t's on the guidance we gave him. I mean,
Well, I did send you, he did send a revised application.
right, yeah, I saw 2 to 4.
Yeah, so he's reduced his project down, so it's not quite as intense. So
Well, I just, you know,
I will ask him, you know, because I think once you work with him, it'll move quickly. So if we tell him, you know, the meeting in March, and it'll still give him time to move along.
yeah, I just want to subscribe to what Mr. Sifranco told us, that we should really, you know, not overdo it.
Yeah, so we'll do the Rice Plumbing public hearing. We'll go into Sailor Mill, and then we'll just have Brett alone come in so that they can kind of maybe
Yeah,
start.
'cause I suspect that's going to take us to 9 o'clock. I mean, Sailor Mill's going to be an hour. They're 7:30 to 8:30, right?
Yeah.
Ish. So,
Yeah, they will.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
And I guess, you know, the reason the sensitivity on Sailor Mill, right, there's a lot of for-fee resources, so I just want to be very sensitive to, you know, the
Right.
scheduling and everything else.
yep.
I wanted to ask Frank if you could send me whatever files that I can present with your public hearing. So I'd have it all in one place.
Actually, that's a great segue into what I wanted to raise, which was back with Catherine and CT Mail. I know there've been some discussions here and there about how we want to handle the public hearing, and I guess I'd like to open it up in terms of what role we'd like CT Mail to take in terms of potentially moderating the public hearing.
Oh, there you
go. And helping.
Yeah, I know Steve and I kind of discussed that. CT Mail's represented some municipalities with very, very contentious public hearings. Think a Walmart in a town that didn't want it. So, you know, in those cases, everything was done to the extreme, meaning they held a stenographer paid for by the applicant. You know, CT Mail essentially would, after the fact, review all the minutes and kind of help organize the comments into different bins. I don't think that's necessary for this project. We've kind of already and I'll say triage the comments we received, which would have been the ones by letter and email, kind of into different categories. So our plan would be just to do that after the fact, you know, unless the town really wanted us to kind of run the public hearing, which we can. So it's up to you. I can a public hearing, I can be the one to get yelled at, so I don't mind. But I guess is I haven't personally spoken to any of the folks that would come to the public hearing. So I don't know. I feel like in Zoom, sometimes it is better organized because you can say, okay, you know, Mr. Smith, you're speaking, Mrs. Jones, you're speaking, you know, whereas in a physical meeting, sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah, well, that's what I don't know that we want to leave it up to Dave Edinger or somebody on the board to try and manage that, only because, you know, my view, we should be paying attention to what's being said versus.
Yeah, no, I've been.
Well, that's why I would do it, not you guys.
Yeah,
I can handle that if needed.
What's that?
I can handle the meeting if it's needed. We'll just mute everybody and have hand raising and chat to be recognized, and that's absolutely doable.
So back to my question.
Oh, sure, go Helene.
My question was, are you going to be handling the not slides, but the files that are to be presented at the meeting? Like I do I do.
Correct.
You'll do that.
Me too, yes. I would say is maybe just agree to what role I have during the presentation, what role, if any, did you want the applicant to make a presentation? I think generally the applicant should make a presentation prior to the public hearing. So in that case, likely, you know, Barry or Frank would scroll through themselves.
Okay.
You know, and we could even talk offline specifically about, you know, CT Mail's role in this, and kind of, you know, what we can do. And just for minute keeping, is this something where you physically record the meeting and those stand as the minutes, or does Janelle produce separate minutes for the meeting?
Separate,
yeah.
Producing typed minutes.
We also post the recording of this and a transcript done by an automated transcript thing, which is very inaccurate and awful.
Yes, that's what I was asking, because I've had a few that were done that way, and I'm always interested at what the computer thinks we're saying. So
yeah.
I hope Janelle has vacation planned or some kind of after that meeting. It's gonna be a lot of minutes. Poor thing.
Yes. You know, again, I kind of gave Steve a worst case example of holding a public hearing just because, you know, we're talking, it had to be in the high school auditorium because we had, you know, thousands of people coming. But I do think we just need to be clear that you take the minutes accurately and that each comment is recorded in a way that the board is able to respond to it. And then a lot of it's going to be, you know, say we get 25 comments verbally, and obviously you've received a lot via email and paper mail. The board does not have to respond to public comment, as you're aware. You know, the CT Mail can help you with, do you respond to certain comments, or do you ask the applicant to respond to certain comments? You know, again, I think we have a flavor for the type of comments we're going to get. But, you know, again, you could choose to just listen to all the comments and then, you know, not formally respond, or you choose to formally respond. And we've done both. We've helped with that document in the past.
I think that was as many as we're probably going to get, or that we've already have.
Yeah.
It would be best to let them, we've done that in the past. We've let them just speak on what their feelings are.
Sure. And just for how you handle meetings during this comment period, will the board be interacting with the public at all? Again, if Mr. Smith makes a comment, will you, Steve, respond, or will you just let Mr. Smith finish? Then the next person goes.
Yeah, that's, I guess, something we can discuss. We, you know, have handled it differently at different times, I'll say, based on the situation. I think as the crowd gets bigger, it's better to just let the people speak and then perhaps address some of it at the end of the meeting or at the next meeting, right, to reply to some of it.
Yep, to let you kind of compose yourself. Sure. I think the one thing that I forgot just to ask of the applicant is, I know you're trying to make a submission end of this week. If you could try to put in writing anything related to a traffic assessment, what the trip generations will be, your discussion with highway superintendent, if you have a chance to look at the road speed and some of the available site distances, I definitely would like to have that in preparation for part 2 of the EAF, because I really do feel like that might be one of the only few items that we need information on. Is that doable?
Yeah, we'll get you something on that. Yes.
Great.
Catherine, on the, and to the board, on the issue of the public hearing, usually I counsel my client to do no more than like a 10-minute presentation, because it's really the public's night to speak that night at the meeting. So we would probably limit our presentation to a short presentation by probably Barry and Frank, and then listen to what everyone says. We will not, the board can do what they want, but we will not be interacting or answering any questions that night. I mean, I think our role is to listen to what the public says and then craft our responses as the board sees fit. So.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's what basically how we've played it in the past in terms of make a short presentation. Just to kind of overall describe what's taking place for especially those who maybe are just, getting up to speed with it. And, my view from the standpoint of interaction with the public during the meeting, I think typically it tends to be us asking for clarification on things, right? If there's something that somebody said that we're not clear on or whatever. So, but Ed, I know you had some thoughts in terms of, speakers.
I think it should be a listening exercise for the board. And I've been kind of on the understanding all along that CT Mail would conduct the public hearing and be the moderator and limit, make people register and limit them to 1 or 2 minutes and move on. I mean, and I think the board will just sit back and listen, and then we can make our determination.
Right.
Is that something that you can do, Catherine?
Sure, I would just have to coordinate
Yeah.
with Janelle and the others about my access to this, given that it is the town's account and whatnot, but that's, I'd say the tech stuff we can hash out next week.
Yeah, that's where David Edinger comes in that spoke earlier. David has actually been managing the Zoom component for us, so that's, and that
Be
actually.
happy to work with you anytime before then on how to do this best, Catherine.
And I
Sure,
just,
yeah, and a lot of it would just be, as obviously the participants would be us, the people here tonight. And then the other attendees, you would basically, say, all right, raise your hand if you want to be let in. I'd let them in. I'd make sure that their mic's on and say, I believe is 5-minute your limit for speaking. You have 5 minutes and I'll time it on my end and give them a warning if they're nearing the end.
We also like, and this is probably general accepted practice, I guess, but to record, who they are and where, I'll say where they reside, so we know, are they next door neighbor, or are they 2 towns over that just heard about it, right? So.
Correct, and I will have a colleague in other cases where we've moderated it, is I'll have a colleague also on the call that will just be honestly typing, not, I'd say, to clerk or Janelle's level minutes, but typing notes, essentially to back up, if there's any gap in who said what, we'd have that person also taking those notes.
Okay.
So Catherine, not to make you nervous, but I take good notes. And one of the key reasons we selected yourself and your firm was the concept of defensive decision-making and your ability to help us with this public hearing.
Yeah.
So as Ed Cahill stated, we really want to lean on you and your team to help us through this. I'm going to say this is probably going to be our most difficult public hearing, maybe our second most. And we really do want to lean on you for that expertise, because
Absolutely, yeah.
there's going to be big voices there, and we want to be efficient, but considerate to all.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, I think actually the Zoom format helps because you can cut off somebody. Whereas again, I feel like sometimes in person, you might get a little more riled up.
Oh, Ed just normally puts them in a headlock.
Yep. Yep. And again, a lot of it's going to be is, do we use the raise your hand format on Zoom? Most municipalities do that when there's maybe a few people. One thing that might work here is when it starts, I would say, please enter your name in the chat bar if you would like to speak, that, and have a list and just go through, hey, all 25 of you. And that way I can let people in and out more efficiently versus the using your hand, because that is sometimes difficult if someone's calling in for them to press like star something to raise their hand to be let in. So again, I'm assuming that you don't have anyone who wants to comment on Zoom that would not have the technology to call in, right? Most people are used to attending these meetings at the Town of Olive, right?
Not always.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's
For the most part. For the most part.
Yeah, I would think the immediate community has been joining us pretty regularly. You can just tell by the numbers.
Okay.
I would say the other avenue for those people is the, letter to the town. Right, so.
Yep, and again, we can work out a script of what I say initially, introduce myself, help moderating, that kind of thing. But yeah, again, I do think this is going to be an interesting public hearing. I like to say is it can't be any worse when the cops had to be called. So.
All right. So Catherine, if I may, just to kind of recap what we've just discussed, right? So CT Mail, thank you. We'll take the lead on this. Mr. Moriello, you said your client, a less than 10-minute presentation, but they would not be responding just because it's the public's evening. I believe the board agrees that we'll be in a listen-only mode. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I think.
Right, Janelle, you're going to capture minutes as you traditionally do. David E., are you going to run the technology or not? I didn't get an answer to that. I'm sorry.
I think Catherine and I need to work out the final details of that in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
All right,
We'll communicate between ourselves and figure it out.
All right, we'll defer to your expertises. Thank you. Janelle will take minutes as usual. So then what do we, and I guess because we haven't typically run public hearings in this fashion, how does the public then get answers to questions? Do we follow up afterwards?
I would say that's the board's decision. In many cases, I've had some chairs who will respond to every email the public sends to him or her. I don't think that's the best idea to go for a tit for tat.
That's a lot of emails, Steve.
Yeah,
What
but
I've
that's-
seen as the best honest response would be if there seems to be a theme, let's say traffic.
Right.
There could be a document that CT Mail helps the board prepare, a week after the public hearing to say, here's what's been submitted on traffic and our opinion on it. Just statements, because again, you're going to get the people saying there's going to be 1,000 more cars coming down the road. That's not true. Here's the facts. You're likely going to get comments about community character. This is a very rural area. 13 homes is too much. I suggest the board come up with some ideas on how to respond to that. You're going to have maybe 4 or 5 bullet points responding to sub comments.
Right.
That way you're not responding to every single person, because again, the comments are probably going to be the same feel. I've seen some comments in support, I've seen some against, and they actually tend to have the same tone.
Okay, no, that's good guidance. So we'll bucket them by the themes, if you will, right? Traffic, proximity to the road with the houses, so on and so forth. Okay.
Yep. And again, you can choose to respond or not. And one thing about the board not interacting during the public hearing, the only time that I would feel comfortable speaking to a member of the public as they speak is if we start to get out of control. Say a statement is made that's not factual. Then if the same person repeats it 3 times, I might say, hold on, let's take a break. The application is for 13 homes, it's for this, set it straight. So I have no problem interjecting when it starts to get out of control, in the sense that because again, if Mr. Smith speaks and says something that's untrue, everyone else hears it and starts to believe that that's untrue. I have no problem setting it and saying, just remember this application is this,
I think
not
that's
projecting my opinion, but just trying to bring it back.
Right.
From a board standpoint, I think that kind of response, as well as, keeping it under control and getting clarification where there are things that may not be clear to someone, right? So.
Yep. And then one thing too we've done it, and again, I'm talking about public hearings that are 6, 7, 8 hours in time, really excessive public hearings, is we'll say does anyone end up anything new? Meaning, we've heard the same people 40 times. You know, but I don't necessarily think there's honestly that many people who are going to come and speak about the project, that it's going to be an hours-long endeavor, correct?
I
Or
would-
no?
I would respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I would think, you know, we'll probably have a pretty massive, if this was gonna be in person, I would think we'd have a full room.
Yep.
We filled up,
Okay.
you're gonna tell we're country by this description, but we filled up the Olive Bridge Firehouse for someone using a chainsaw in the neighborhood. So,
Yeah.
when our people need to come out, they come out.
Yeah, and that's where we can have a discussion on other times where we've had big meetings, we have a sign-in. And generally the people that want to speak, say, attorney for the opposition or a direct neighbor, they'll put their name down first. I want to get in first. And then the people that kind of populate the end are they, oh yeah, I saw someone talking and I want to talk too. So if it gets to the point where it's the same thing repeatedly, you know, it could be something where Steve kind of, you know, signals me as like, okay, close this down, or politely ask people to, if, you know, say Mr. Smith says he's concerned about community character and here's why he's concerned. I might say, you know what, I agree with my neighbor, Mr. Smith. I'm also concerned about that. And instead of being a 5-minute statement, it's now a 30-second statement. I might try to encourage people to not repeat the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
Yep.
Are we allowed to set a time limit on a public hearing? Or at least if we want to suspend it for a period, you know?
I don't know. I don't know if it's in your town code. I've
Right.
never had one where it's suspended. I've had one where it was had to be redone because there was a snowstorm and half the people showed up, half didn't, but
I think we can ask people to abide by a time limit for their, you know, concerns, to express their concerns, but I don't believe that we can, you know, stop anyone from speaking if they want to speak, right? So,
unless they're over their time or they're using threatening
Right.
language.
right.
Can we?
Well, you
can
know,
we
it's
add-
the public hearing is discretionary, and I've been to public hearings where the planning board chairman has put up an egg timer with 1 minute, and that's all everybody got. So
Yep.
then I've been to public hearings where they let people go on of 6 or, you know, time and time after, you know, it runs the gamut. So
Okay. Well, you know, Catherine, I like your idea, right? If someone brings up a topic and it's a repeated topic, maybe we could just poll the group and say, you know, via chat, if you have an opinion on that topic, we'll capture it, move on to the next topic, right?
Yeah,
So
well,
so
it's like-
we
it's
just
like-
don't have Groundhog's Day, right?
It's like the emails we got. A lot of them were almost like a cookie cutter from the one before. So
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at, is I've seen that a lot for very projects that have a lot of opposition, where clearly one person writes an email that
Right,
all the neighbors
right,
do the same
right.
thing. And the problem is the neighbors don't know that they're gonna come in, I'm gonna read this, and they don't realize that all their neighbors are reading the same thing. And usually by like the 10th person, they start to figure it out that, man, this is, you know, and you know, I feel that everyone is owed to speak about a project, whether they support it or not. And I'm sure the board agrees.
I'm starting to feel like that right now, actually. All right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Great. So again, just my focus for next week would be to review the EAF, make sure I get all the information from the applicant, which they've assured that occurred. And then in the next month, I can work with, you know, Dave and Janelle on just specifically the format of the meeting. But we'll get through it.
That's terrific.
thank you.
Okay, so Janelle, we're good on the next agenda. We're gonna have the Rice public hearing at 7:10. Then we'll go right into Sailor Mill, plan 45 minutes for that. And then cap off with Bread Alone. If Mr. Flesh insists, have him contact me.
Okay.
So does the board then want to vote on the scheduling the public hearing for officially for February 16th?
Sure.
What's the rationale behind that, Mr. Bacon, if you don't mind me asking?
To vote? To make it official, I guess, you know.
Well, I'm saying, I guess at this, I'm I'm just thinking, what if something emerges on the 2nd that somehow changes that trajectory for the 16th?
Well, do you have, is that going to be 14 days enough time? I guess it is, right?
No, I'll tell you
No, I
that.
guess it's not, right?
Yeah, so we can't wait until after the meeting of the 2nd
Right,
to
right.
determine that you're having a public hearing on the 16th.
Yeah, I
Is it-
think from a technical perspective, the applicant's there for a public hearing.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion for a public hearing?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. We have a public hearing for the Sika
I'll
for
second.
Sailor Mill on the 16th of February, 2021.
Stephen Dibble, did you second that?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against?
Do we say 7:10 on that public hearing?
Sure.
And I'm assuming that is the only thing that's going to be on the agenda that night.
I think that's a good
16th.
assumption.
Yeah.
Yes, that will be the only thing. Well, we put Mr. Flesh afterwards. That's a joke.
Oh, dear.
And then we'll discuss, I guess, at the 2nd, whether or not we're going to send something to the county for referral, right?
Yep.
Mr. Moriello, if you don't mind me asking, I'm not looking for free legal advice, but I mean, so just as we did with another, it's a private enterprise, but we had an application, we sent it to the county and we didn't do a seeker. Are you sharing with us? Are you educating us that by doing that, it's putting us and or the town in harm's way?
Well, I think if you have a required referral is different than this instance. This is not a required referral. So you're really getting an advisory opinion from them in my mind. But on required referrals, there have been some cleverly argued arguments, which I've been involved in, about when the proper time to refer is. And if you look at the language of General Municipal Law 239M, the full statement of the proposed action is where that centers upon and what constitutes that. Now, does every judge pay attention to that level of nuance? Not necessarily, but I can say with some manner of certainty that there are judges that do pay attention to it if it's brought to their attention. So especially if you have a situation where, like we're in now, where it's, to some degree contentious, although I don't think that the people that are concerned in the neighborhood have seen the level of detail now that's being put into the project. So I'm hoping that some of that opposition dissipates when they see the level of detail and the mitigation measures that are being employed. So I'm hopeful that some of that will dissipate, but I always go in the theory that, you prepare the record to be defensible in court. So we don't know where where this project's going in terms of approvals or in terms of opposition to it. So I just think we should be careful about how we proceed.
Appreciate that feedback and the guidance. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Steve, is there anything else?
I think that's got it covered from my viewpoint.
Mr. Bacon?
No, I think that's it. And Mike did a good job talking about the full statement of the action. I've been involved in litigation of that as well. Now, it depends on the judge a lot, but the full statement of the action, if you forget to send an EIS to the county, you've got a big problem. That's the case I won.
Understood. All right. Okay, so with that, we'll thank Mr. Dunn and his party. Thank you all very much. Barry and George and the group,
Thank you to the board.
you're welcome. So I'll make a motion that we close the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, happy New
Nice
Year,
to
and
meet you,
everyone have a good
Catherine.
night.
Good night.
Hey, thank